When you think of the United States, you can't avoid one name that looms larger than life: George Washington. His face is on the $1 bill, his likeness adorns monuments across the nation, and his legacy is the very foundation of the United States. But beyond the statues and paintings, Washington was a man whose decisions shaped not just the history of a country, but the principles on which it was built. Born on February 22, 1732, in Westmoreland County, Virginia, Washington's early life wasn't marked by privilege or ease. His family's wealth came from land ownership, but Washington's childhood was filled with struggles. His father died when he was just 11, leaving him to help manage the family estate. Yet from these early challenges, a young man emerged who would later become known for his resilience, leadership, and vision. Washington's career began as a land surveyor, but it wasn't long before he found himself involved in military service during the French and Indian War. His time as a lieutenant colonel provided him with invaluable military experience, yet it also introduced him to the harsh realities of command. In 1754, at just 22 years old, he led his first military engagement, a battle that would shape his future leadership style, characterized by a cautious, strategic approach rather than reckless ambition. But it wasn't until 1775, when Washington was appointed as the Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army by the Second Continental Congress, that he truly began to influence the course of history. America was still in its infancy, struggling for independence from the British Empire. Washington, with his calm demeanor and belief in the cause, united a fledgling army and led it through trials and defeats, eventually securing a victory at Yorktown in 1781. His leadership during the Revolutionary War solidified his reputation as a man of extraordinary character and vision. Yet Washington's influence didn't end with military victories. When the war ended and the United States emerged as a nation, Washington's presence became critical in the formation of the new government. In 1787, he was unanimously elected as the presiding officer of the Constitutional Convention, where the blueprint for the U.S. Constitution was drawn up. His leadership ensured the creation of a system of government that would protect individual liberties and prevent tyranny. By the time Washington was elected the first president of the United States in 1789, he had already shaped the course of American history. His presidency was not just about setting policies, but about setting precedents. The way he conducted himself in office, his decision to serve only 2 terms, his creation of the presidential cabinet, and his stance on foreign neutrality became the bedrock for the modern U.S. presidency. But Washington was not without flaws. His early ownership of enslaved people on his estate at Mount Vernon reflects the contradictions of his era. However, over time, he came to see the inhumanity of slavery. In his will, he made the unprecedented decision to free his own enslaved people after his wife's death, a rare action for a man of his stature at the time. Though he stepped down from the presidency in 1797, Washington's legacy continued to guide the nation. His decision to peacefully relinquish power set a standard for the peaceful transition of authority, which remains a cornerstone of U.S. democracy today. Washington died in 1799 at the age of 67, but his name endures as a symbol of American ideals and resilience. Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States, is widely regarded as one of the greatest leaders in American history. His leadership during the American Civil War and his commitment to preserving the Union and ending slavery forever marked a defining moment in the nation's development. Born in a log cabin in Hodgenville, Kentucky in 1809, Lincoln's early life was one of hardship. He was largely self-educated, reading books by the firelight and developing a deep understanding of the principles of liberty, equality, and justice. His humble beginnings were a stark contrast to the towering figure he would become, both in stature and in influence. Lincoln's political career began in the Illinois state legislature, where he first gained prominence for his opposition to the spread of slavery into new territories. His debates with Stephen A. Douglas during the Illinois Senate race of 1858 brought him national attention. Though he lost the Senate race, the debates and Lincoln's House-divided speech cemented his position as a leader in the fight against the expansion of slavery. In 1860, Lincoln was elected President of the United States. His election, though a victory for the Republican Party, also marked the beginning of the Civil War. Southern states, fearing the abolition of slavery, seceded from the Union, forming the Confederate States of America. Lincoln's immediate challenge was to preserve the Union at all costs, even as he grappled with the issue of slavery, which had divided the nation for decades. The Civil War began in April 1861 when Confederate forces attacked Fort Sumter in South Carolina. Lincoln's leadership in the war was characterized by a resolve to reunite the nation, even at the cost of tremendous bloodshed. He understood that the war was not just about preserving the Union. It was also about securing the future of liberty and justice for all people, regardless of race. One of Lincoln's most significant acts as president was the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1, 1863. This executive order declared that all slaves in Confederate-held territory were to be set free. While the proclamation did not immediately end slavery throughout the entire nation, it marked a turning point in the war, making the abolition of slavery an official goal of the Union war effort. In addition to the Emancipation Proclamation, Lincoln worked tirelessly to push through the 13th Amendment, which would permanently abolish slavery in the United States. The amendment was passed by Congress in January 1865 and ratified by the states later that year, solidifying Lincoln's vision of a nation where all men were truly free. Tragically, Lincoln would not live to see the fruits of his labor. On April 14, 1865, just days after General Robert E. Lee's surrender at Appomattox Courthouse, Lincoln was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth, a Confederate sympathizer, while attending a play at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. Lincoln's death shocked the nation, but his legacy endured. He is remembered not only for preserving the Union and ending slavery, but also for his ability to unite a divided country during its darkest hour. His leadership, vision, and courage continue to inspire Americans and people around the world. Thomas Jefferson, the third President of the United States, is one of the most influential figures in American history. Known for his intellect, vision, and commitment to the principles of liberty, Jefferson played a pivotal role in shaping the nation's early ideals and laying the foundation for its democratic institutions. Born on April 13, 1743 in Shadwell, Virginia, Jefferson was raised in an environment of privilege, but his early life was marked by personal loss. He was deeply influenced by the writings of Enlightenment thinkers, particularly those of John Locke and Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who emphasized individual liberty, natural rights, and the power of reason. Jefferson's intellectual curiosity led him to study law, architecture, and the sciences, and he became a prominent figure in Virginia's political and intellectual circles. Jefferson's most enduring legacy, however, lies in his authorship of the Declaration of Independence. In 1776, as a member of the Continental Congress, Jefferson was chosen to write the document that would declare the American colonies free from British rule. His eloquent prose captured the aspirations of a nation in the making, and the Declaration became the cornerstone of American ideals, asserting the fundamental rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The Declaration not only justified the colonies' break from Britain, but also set forth a new vision of governance based on the consent of the governed and the protection of individual rights. As president, Jefferson's vision for the country was rooted in the idea of an agrarian republic. He believed that the strength of the United States lay in its farmers who, in his view, embodied the virtues of independence and self-sufficiency. Jefferson's vision of a decentralized government, with power vested in the states and the people, contrasted sharply with the more centralized government advocated by Alexander Hamilton and other Federalists. One of Jefferson's most significant achievements as president was the Louisiana Purchase in 1803. Jefferson saw the acquisition of this vast territory, nearly 828,000 square miles, as essential for the future growth of the United States. The purchase not only doubled the size of the nation, but also opened up new opportunities for westward expansion. Despite his strict interpretation of the Constitution, Jefferson justified the purchase as an executive action necessary for the country's future. The move sparked a debate about federal powers, but it ultimately set the stage for America's westward growth. Jefferson's presidency also saw the Lewis and Clark Expedition, 1804-1806, which was commissioned to explore the newly acquired territory and map out the western regions of the continent. The expedition provided valuable information about the geography, resources, and Native American tribes of the western U.S., and paved the way for further exploration and settlement. However, Jefferson's presidency was not without challenges. His attempts to maintain neutrality during the conflicts between Britain and France, particularly the Embargo Act of 1807, which sought to prevent U.S. trade with both nations, were unpopular and economically damaging. The act hurt American merchants and was eventually repealed, but it underscored the complexities of maintaining peace and economic stability in an increasingly volatile world. Jefferson's legacy is also complicated by his ownership of enslaved people. Despite his public advocacy for liberty and equality, Jefferson was a slaveholder throughout his life, and his plantation at Monticello was sustained by the labor of enslaved Africans. His failure to fully confront the institution of slavery is a painful contradiction in his legacy, and it has led to ongoing debates about his place in American history. After serving 2 terms as president, Jefferson retired to Monticello, his estate in Virginia, where he continued to be involved in public affairs and intellectual pursuits. He died on July 4, 1826, exactly 50 years after the signing of the Declaration of Independence, a fitting tribute to his central role in the founding of the United States. Jefferson's legacy endures not only in the principles of democracy and individual rights he championed, but also in his vision of a republic built on the values of liberty, self-governance, and westward expansion. Despite the complexities of his life, Jefferson remains one of the key figures in the American story. When you think about the civil rights movement in the United States, one name stands out as the embodiment of peaceful protest and moral leadership: Martin Luther King Jr. His unwavering commitment to justice, equality, and nonviolent resistance transformed the country and helped dismantle the deeply entrenched systems of segregation and racial discrimination that had plagued America for centuries. Born on January 15, 1929, in Atlanta, Georgia, Martin Luther King Jr. grew up in the segregated South, where the effects of racism were a daily reality. His father, Martin Luther King Sr., was a prominent Baptist minister, and young Martin was deeply influenced by both his faith and his father's example of social activism. King's education took him to Morehouse College, where he studied sociology, and later to Boston University, where he earned his doctorate in theology. His academic training, combined with his strong sense of morality, prepared him for the leadership role he would later assume in the civil rights movement. In 1955, King's leadership first gained national attention when he became involved in the Montgomery bus boycott. The boycott was sparked by the arrest of Rosa Parks, a black woman who refused to give up her seat to a white man on a bus in Montgomery, Alabama. King was chosen to lead the boycott, and his eloquent speeches and dedication to nonviolent protest inspired thousands of African Americans to stay off the buses for more than a year. The boycott ended with a victory for the protesters when the Supreme Court declared that segregation on public buses was unconstitutional. King's leadership in Montgomery marked the beginning of a larger movement. In 1957, he co-founded the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC, an organization dedicated to using nonviolent methods to fight segregation and promote civil rights. His philosophy of nonviolence, influenced by Mahatma Gandhi and rooted in his Christian faith, became the cornerstone of his activism. King believed that peaceful resistance, rather than violent confrontation, was the most powerful way to bring about change in a society built on oppression. The 1960s were a period of profound change in the United States, and Martin Luther King Jr. was at the forefront of that change. His speeches, including the iconic "I Have a Dream" speech delivered during the 1963 March on Washington, galvanized millions of people. In that speech, King spoke of a vision for a nation where people were judged by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. His words became a rallying cry for the civil rights movement and have remained a touchstone for those advocating for justice and equality. King's activism was not limited to the fight for racial equality. He also spoke out against poverty, the Vietnam War, and the broader social injustices that affected marginalized communities. In 1964, he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his efforts to combat racial injustice through nonviolent means. However, his opposition to the Vietnam War in the late 1960s led to criticism from some members of the establishment, who felt that he should focus solely on racial issues. King, however, believed that the struggles for racial equality and peace were inseparable, and he continued to speak out against the war and its impact on the poor and African American communities. Tragically, King's life was cut short. On April 4, 1968, while standing on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee, King was assassinated by a gunman. His death left the nation in mourning, but it also left behind a legacy that would continue to inspire generations. His vision of a racially integrated, just society became a guiding principle for the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Landmark legislation that helped dismantle legal segregation and expand voting rights for African Americans. Today, Martin Luther King Jr. is remembered not only for his leadership in the civil rights movement, but also for his profound moral clarity. His commitment to nonviolence and justice continues to influence movements for social change around the world. The Martin Luther King Jr. National Holiday, observed annually on the third Monday of January, serves as a reminder of the work still to be done in the pursuit of equality and justice for all. Franklin D. Roosevelt, often referred to simply as FDR, was one of the most transformative presidents in U.S. history. His leadership during the Great Depression and World War II reshaped the country and cemented his place as one of the most important figures of the 20th century. Born on January 30, 1882, into a wealthy family in Hyde Park, New York, Roosevelt had access to education and privilege from an early age. He attended Harvard University and later studied law at Columbia University, but it was his interest in public service that ultimately defined his life. His political career began when he was elected to the New York State Senate in 1910, and by 1920 he had been nominated as the Democratic candidate for vice president. Although he did not win, Roosevelt's political career continued to rise. In 1921, at the age of 39, Roosevelt was struck by a debilitating illness, polio. The disease left him paralyzed from the waist down, a challenge that many thought would end his political career. However, Roosevelt's resilience and determination to overcome this adversity became a defining characteristic of his life. He spent years recovering, using leg braces and a wheelchair, but never lost his resolve to lead. His battle with polio, which he faced in private, gave him a unique perspective on the struggles of ordinary Americans and inspired many during the difficult years ahead. In 1932, Roosevelt was elected the 32nd President of the United States, taking office during the depths of the Great Depression. The U.S. was facing unprecedented economic turmoil. Millions were unemployed, businesses were failing, and the banking system was on the brink of collapse. Roosevelt promised the American people a New Deal, a set of bold economic programs designed to provide relief, recovery, and reform. His administration passed a series of landmark laws, including the Social Security Act, the National Industrial Recovery Act, and the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, FDIC, which reshaped the role of the federal government in the economy and laid the foundation for modern social safety nets. Roosevelt's approach to governance was unconventional, and his leadership was both visionary and pragmatic. He was not afraid to experiment with new policies and ideas, whether they worked or not. His fireside chats, regular radio addresses where he spoke directly to the American people, became a symbol of his leadership style, direct, personal, and reassuring. Roosevelt's ability to communicate with the public and maintain their confidence in the face of economic despair was one of his greatest strengths. As the 1930s progressed, Roosevelt's leadership would be tested again, this time on the world stage. World War II erupted in 1939, and by 1941, the United States was drawn into the conflict following the attack on Pearl Harbor by Japan. Roosevelt's leadership during the war was pivotal in ensuring the defeat of the Axis powers. He worked closely with British Prime Minister Winston Churchill and Soviet Premier Joseph Stalin, forging the Grand Alliance that would ultimately bring victory over Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan. Roosevelt's vision for the post-war world was one of international cooperation and peace. In 1944, he played a central role in establishing the United Nations at the Bretton Woods Conference, believing that global cooperation was necessary to prevent another world war. Sadly, Roosevelt did not live to see the fruition of his efforts. He died on April 12, 1945, while serving his fourth term as president. His passing marked the end of an era in American history. Franklin D. Roosevelt's legacy endures in the New Deal programs, the strength of the federal government, and his leadership during both the Great Depression and World War II. His presidency forever changed the relationship between the American government and its people, making Roosevelt one of the most influential presidents in U.S. history. Benjamin Franklin is one of the most intriguing and multifaceted figures in American history. Known for his contributions as a statesman, scientist, inventor, and philosopher, Franklin's legacy shaped the foundation of the United States and continues to influence the country today. His wit, wisdom, and diplomatic skill made him an essential figure in the American Revolution and in the creation of the nation. Born on January 17, 1706, in Boston, Massachusetts, Franklin grew up in a poor family with limited formal education. However, his curiosity and determination to improve himself were evident from a young age. At 12, he became an apprentice to his brother James, a printer, which exposed Franklin to the world of publishing and writing. This apprenticeship was pivotal in shaping his intellectual development, and Franklin soon became an avid reader, teaching himself many subjects and honing his writing skills. By the time Franklin was in his 20s, he had established himself as a successful printer and publisher, founding the Pennsylvania Gazette in 1728. His publication not only allowed him to make a name for himself in the business world, but also provided him with a platform to express his ideas. Franklin's writing became influential in colonial America, and his famous Poor Richard's Almanac, 1732-1758, made him one of the most widely read authors of the time. Through his almanac, Franklin imparted wisdom on topics ranging from morality to finance, and his maxims such as early to bed, early to rise, makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise became part of the American lexicon. But Franklin's influence wasn't confined to writing and business. He was a scientist and inventor, whose curiosity about the natural world led to several important discoveries. His most famous scientific experiment, the kite and key experiment in 1752, demonstrated that lightning was a form of electricity. This groundbreaking work in electricity earned him international recognition and led to numerous advancements in the field. Franklin's inventiveness extended beyond science. He invented practical devices such as the Franklin stove, which improved home heating, and bifocal glasses, which remain in use today. His work as an inventor demonstrated his focus on improving the quality of life for ordinary people, making him one of America's first practical innovators. However, Franklin's most lasting legacy lies in his contributions to the founding of the United States. He was one of the most prominent figures at the Second Continental Congress and played a crucial role in securing foreign assistance for the American colonies during the Revolutionary War. As a diplomat in France, Franklin's charm, intellect, and political acumen helped secure French support, which was instrumental in America's victory over Britain. Franklin's diplomatic skills also shone at the Treaty of Paris in 1783, where he helped negotiate the peace settlement that ended the Revolutionary War. Franklin's ability to engage with both European and American leaders helped lay the groundwork for the new nation's international standing. But Franklin's involvement in the American Revolution wasn't just about diplomacy. He was deeply involved in the intellectual development of the United States. As a founding member of the American Philosophical Society and a key figure in the creation of the Constitution, Franklin's ideas about governance, liberty, and the role of the individual influenced the shaping of the new government. Franklin was one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence in 1776. And although he was in his 70s at the time, his wisdom and experience were invaluable to the Continental Congress. His efforts helped ensure that the new nation would be based on democratic principles, equality, and the protection of individual rights. Though Franklin lived a full and impactful life, he remained deeply concerned with the future of the United States. He died on April 17, 1790, at the age of 84. At the time of his death, Franklin had lived through an era of immense change and had played a pivotal role in the creation of the United States. Today, Benjamin Franklin's legacy is not only as a founding father, but as a man whose inventions, ideas, and diplomacy changed the course of American history. His contributions to science, his ability to shape public opinion, and his leadership during the Revolution ensured that he would be remembered as one of the most important figures in the formation of the United States. Eleanor Roosevelt, the wife of President Franklin D. Roosevelt, is remembered not just for her role as First Lady, but as one of the most influential women in American history. Her life was marked by a commitment to social justice, human rights, and the empowerment of those who had been historically marginalized. She used her position to advocate for change, not only in the United States, but on a global scale. Born on October 11, 1884 in New York City, Eleanor was the niece of Theodore Roosevelt, the 26th President of the United States, and the daughter of Elliott Roosevelt and Anna Hall Roosevelt. From an early age, Eleanor faced hardship. She was deeply affected by the deaths of both her parents by the time she was just 10 years old, and was raised by her grandmother. This loss profoundly shaped her character, making her sensitive to the suffering of others and determined to make a difference in the world. In 1905, Eleanor married Franklin D. Roosevelt, her distant cousin, and they had 6 children together. Throughout her marriage, she faced challenges, both personal and professional. Though Franklin became a prominent political figure, Eleanor struggled with her own sense of self-worth, compounded by her personal struggles with her marriage and the depression she experienced. But it was through these challenges that she found her voice and a platform for her activism. As First Lady, Eleanor Roosevelt radically transformed the role. She was not content to simply serve as a ceremonial figure, as many previous First Ladies had done. Instead, she used her position to actively advocate for the poor, the disenfranchised, and the oppressed. She championed the causes of racial equality, women's rights, and labor rights. And she was an outspoken critic of segregation and discrimination. Her advocacy for the New Deal programs, which were designed to alleviate the suffering caused by the Great Depression, demonstrated her deep commitment to social welfare. Eleanor Roosevelt's weekly newspaper column called My Day became an important means for her to communicate directly with the American public. Through the column, she addressed issues ranging from civil rights to women's issues, and she used her platform to encourage social and political activism. Her advocacy for human rights extended far beyond the U.S. borders. After World War II, when the horrors of the Holocaust came to light, Eleanor Roosevelt was appointed as the first chair of the United Nations Commission on Human Rights. She played a pivotal role in the drafting of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, a document that remains a cornerstone of international human rights law today. Eleanor's influence was not confined to politics. She was also a prominent figure in the world of journalism and literature. She wrote for various magazines, authored books, and lectured around the world, using her voice to promote the causes of equality and justice. She was a tireless advocate for women, believing that they should have equal access to education, employment, and the political process. Her commitment to public service extended into her later years as well. After Franklin's death in 1945, Eleanor continued to serve as a delegate to the United Nations and remained active in social justice causes. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy appointed her as a delegate to the United Nations General Assembly, where she continued to work on behalf of human rights and the welfare of children and women worldwide. Eleanor Roosevelt's legacy as a champion of human rights and social justice endures today. Her courage, intelligence, and compassion not only defined her time as First Lady, but also set the stage for future generations of women in public service. She is remembered not just for being the wife of a president, but for her own tireless work in improving the lives of the American people and advocating for the rights of all people around the world. Susan B. Anthony is one of the most iconic figures in the history of the women's suffrage movement in the United States. Her tireless work for gender equality, particularly in the fight for a woman's right to vote, helped to transform the landscape of American society and paved the way for future generations of women to engage in politics and public life. Born on February 15, 1820 in Adams, Massachusetts, Susan B. Anthony grew up in a family that was active in the Quaker faith, which emphasized social justice and equality. From a young age, she was exposed to ideas of reform and activism, as her father was a strong advocate for women's rights and abolitionism. The values of fairness and equality that she learned in her early years would define her life's work. Anthony's initial career was in education. She became a teacher at the age of 16, and later she worked as a women's rights lecturer. But it wasn't long before her focus shifted from teaching to advocating for social change. In the mid-1800s, the issue of women's rights, particularly the right to vote, began to gain traction, and Anthony quickly became a leader in the movement. In 1848, the first women's rights convention was held in Seneca Falls, New York, where leaders like Elizabeth Cady Stanton called for women's suffrage and the recognition of women's equality. While Anthony was not initially at Seneca Falls, it was an event that would shape her career and mission. Anthony soon teamed up with Stanton and became one of the most important advocates for the suffrage movement. Throughout her life, Susan B. Anthony faced immense obstacles. During the mid-19th century, women were still considered second-class citizens, unable to own property or vote. Anthony's activism challenged these social norms. She traveled the country, giving speeches and organizing campaigns to demand women's right to vote, an issue that was deeply controversial at the time. One of Anthony's most daring acts occurred in 1872 when she was arrested for voting in the presidential election in Rochester, New York. She had been involved in efforts to educate women about their voting rights and believed that the 14th and 15th Amendments, which guaranteed equal protection under the law, gave women the right to vote. When she attempted to cast a ballot, she was arrested, tried, and fined $100, a fine she never paid. Though Anthony was not successful in winning the vote for women during her lifetime, she laid the groundwork for future activism. She was instrumental in the creation of the National American Woman Suffrage Association, NAWSA, which was dedicated to securing voting rights for women across the country. She served as its president for many years, tirelessly pushing for the passage of a constitutional amendment that would guarantee women the right to vote. Despite the numerous setbacks and challenges she faced, Anthony never lost faith in the power of activism. She worked tirelessly until her death on March 13, 1906, at the age of 86. Just 14 years after her death, the 19th Amendment was ratified in 1920, giving women the right to vote, a victory that was, in many ways, the culmination of Anthony's lifetime of work. Susan B. Anthony's legacy is one of determination, courage, and unwavering belief in justice. She is remembered not only for her efforts in securing the right to vote for women, but also for her role in shaping the broader fight for women's equality in all aspects of American life. Her work continues to inspire generations of women and men alike to challenge systems of inequality and to fight for the rights of all people. Theodore Roosevelt, the 26th President of the United States, was one of the most dynamic and consequential leaders in American history. Known for his vibrant personality, his progressive policies, and his unwavering commitment to public service, Roosevelt reshaped the U.S. government and its role in the world. Born on October 27, 1858 in New York City, Roosevelt came from a wealthy family, but his early life was fraught with health challenges. Suffering from asthma and other ailments, he was often bedridden as a child. However, Roosevelt's determination to overcome his physical limitations fueled his lifelong pursuit of strength, adventure, and personal growth. His motto, "Speak softly and carry a big stick," encapsulated his belief in diplomacy backed by strength. Roosevelt's early career was marked by a series of adventurous pursuits. He was a writer, a historian, and an advocate for the reform of city politics. He served as the police commissioner of New York City, where he earned a reputation for fighting corruption and improving the city's law enforcement. But it was his time in the Spanish-American War in 1898 that brought him national fame. As a leader of the Rough Riders, a volunteer cavalry unit, Roosevelt gained a reputation as a courageous and charismatic leader during the Battle of San Juan Hill in Cuba. After the war, Roosevelt returned to New York and was appointed as the Assistant Secretary of the Navy under President William McKinley. He was a staunch advocate for expanding the U.S. Navy and making America a global power. His vision for the future of the United States included an aggressive foreign policy and the construction of the Panama Canal, which would facilitate trade and increase U.S. influence in the Western Hemisphere. In 1901, following the assassination of President McKinley, Roosevelt became the youngest president in U.S. history at the age of 42. His presidency marked the beginning of a new era of American politics. Roosevelt was a progressive who sought to address the challenges posed by industrialization, urbanization, and the rise of corporate power. His administration took on powerful trusts, breaking up monopolies, and establishing stronger regulatory policies for businesses. Roosevelt's antitrust lawsuits were a key part of his legacy, as he sought to ensure that competition remained a driving force in the economy. Roosevelt also sought to improve the lives of ordinary Americans through social reforms. His Square Deal included measures to protect workers, consumers, and the environment. He pushed for regulations on food and drug safety, and in 1906, he signed the Pure Food and Drug Act, which laid the groundwork for modern food safety standards. Roosevelt was also a champion of environmental conservation, creating the National Park Service and preserving millions of acres of public lands for future generations. On the global stage, Roosevelt sought to expand America's influence. He negotiated the end of the Russo-Japanese War in 1905, for which he won the Nobel Peace Prize. Roosevelt's vision for a more assertive U.S. role in the world also included the construction of the Panama Canal, which he oversaw during his presidency. This massive engineering project connected the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans and cemented the United States as a major player in global trade and military strategy. After leaving office in 1909, Roosevelt remained active in politics and public life. He famously ran for president again in 1912 as the candidate of the Progressive Party, challenging his former protege, William Howard Taft, for the Republican nomination. Although he lost the election, Roosevelt's ideas continued to influence the direction of the country, especially in the area of social welfare and labor rights. Theodore Roosevelt passed away on January 6, 1919, but his legacy as a dynamic leader who pushed for social reform, environmental conservation, and global influence endures. He reshaped the presidency, making it an office of significant power and public engagement, and his progressive ideas continue to influence American politics today. When we think about the technological revolution that has shaped the modern world, one name stands out as a visionary, an inventor, and a leader: Steve Jobs. As the co-founder of Apple Inc., Jobs revolutionized the way we live, work, and communicate. His influence on technology, design, and business is unparalleled, and his work continues to shape the world today. Born on February 24, 1955 in San Francisco, California, Jobs was adopted by Clara and Paul Jobs shortly after his birth. From a young age, he showed an interest in technology and electronics. His early curiosity led him to experiment with computers and other gadgets, and he eventually attended Reed College in Portland, Oregon, before dropping out to pursue his passion for technology and innovation. In 1976, at the age of 21, Jobs co-founded Apple with his friend Steve Wozniak and Ronald Wayne in the garage of his parents' home. Their goal was simple: to create personal computers that were user-friendly and accessible to the general public. The Apple I was their first product, followed by the Apple II, which became one of the first successful personal computers in the market. Apple's early success marked the beginning of a new era in personal computing. However, it was in 1984 that Jobs truly changed the game. With the introduction of the Macintosh, he presented a personal computer with a graphical user interface, making computing more intuitive and accessible to a wider audience. This was a pivotal moment in the history of technology, as it shifted the focus from command line interfaces to graphical interfaces, which are now standard in personal computers today. Despite Apple's early success, Jobs faced significant challenges. In 1985, after a power struggle within the company, he was ousted from Apple. However, rather than fade into obscurity, Jobs went on to achieve even greater success. In 1986, he purchased Pixar Animation Studios, which would later become a leader in computer-generated animation. Pixar's success culminated in the release of Toy Story in 1995, the first feature-length computer-animated film, which revolutionized the animation industry. Meanwhile, Jobs also founded Next, a company that focused on creating high-end computers for the education and business markets. Though Next was not a commercial success, it played a crucial role in the development of modern computing technology, and its software would eventually be used as the foundation for Mac OS X, the operating system that would power Apple's products in the future. In 1996, Apple, struggling financially, acquired Next, bringing Jobs back to the company he had founded. His return marked a new era for Apple, one of bold innovation and design excellence. Jobs introduced products like the iMac, iPod, iPhone, and iPad, each of which revolutionized their respective industries and changed the way people interacted with technology. The iPhone, in particular, was a game changer, combining a phone, an iPod, and an internet device into a single, sleek, and powerful device. It redefined the concept of a smartphone and set the standard for mobile technology. Jobs' design philosophy emphasized simplicity, elegance, and functionality. He believed that technology should not only be powerful, but also aesthetically pleasing and intuitive to use. His attention to detail and commitment to perfection drove the Apple team to create products that were not only functional, but also works of art. Steve Jobs was also known for his leadership style, which was both inspiring and demanding. He pushed his employees to think differently, to innovate, and to challenge the status quo. His ability to create a culture of creativity and excellence at Apple was a key factor in the company's success. However, Jobs was also known for his perfectionism and sometimes abrasive personality, which led to tensions within the company. Despite these challenges, his leadership was pivotal in Apple's rise to become one of the most valuable and influential companies in the world. Jobs' influence extended far beyond technology. He was a cultural icon who changed the way people interacted with technology and the way technology interacted with the world. His legacy is not just in the products he created, but in the way he fundamentally altered the relationship between people in the digital world. Today, Apple's products continue to shape the tech industry, and Jobs' vision of a more connected, intuitive, and elegant world lives on in the company he built. Steve Jobs passed away on October 5, 2011, after a long battle with pancreatic cancer. His death marked the end of an era in the technology world, but his legacy continues to inspire innovators, entrepreneurs, and creators around the globe. Jobs' impact on technology, design, and business will be felt for generations to come.